Sorry, Ray.
No worries, it's okay. That's important. This is our new Employee Equity Academy, and we're so excited and thrilled to have you here. We appreciate you making the time and making yourself available to participate in the NEEA kickoff event. And really, the purpose of this kickoff event is to not only serve as an intro into the larger 3-day new Employee Equity Academy that's up and coming pretty soon, but equally important, share some of the work around equity mindedness and anti-racism that we are engaging in as individuals at Fresno City College and collectively as an institution. So a lot of what today will include is some context setting. I understand for some of you, some of the information may not be new, and for others, it may be newer. And that's fine. That's actually beautiful, I think, because I think that your varying degrees of understanding and awareness of student equity, equity mindedness, and anti-racism in general is going to make for a great learning space today. So with that being said, I guess I'll introduce myself first. I have a wonderful team here, a small but mighty team. There's more of us who get to learn about later, but my name is Ray Ramirez. I'm the Director of Student Equity and Success, and I have been working at Fresno City College really since 2012. I started as an adjunct faculty. I still have the privilege to teach a course or two here and there, so I'm excited to get to teach in person here in the fall. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Susie to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm Susie Nitzel on the new Employee Equity Academy planning team. I'm also the professional development coordinator for Fresno City College, meaning I coordinate all professional development that happens on the campus. That is for faculty, for classified professionals, and for administrators. And my third hat is I am also the classified Senate president for one more year.
Thank you, Susie. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Taketa, and while Susie thinks that she's only going to be classified Senate president for one more year, I have a feeling it's going to run a little longer than that. And I hope it does. One of the reasons is because I am, this year is going to be my first year as the academic Senate president. And I'm really looking forward to working with Susie together to really combine and strategize the efforts of both of the Senates, because definitely as we work together, the college is much stronger and much better for our students. So I was a new faculty member in 2014. So I guess it's been about 7 years now. And I'm looking forward to meeting you all today and to working with you, hopefully for many years in the future.
Ray, if you're talking, you're muted.
Okay, that was strange. I couldn't unmute myself. Thanks for the help, Susie. And with that, let's turn it over to Celia. Celia, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Celia Martinez. I'm the office specialist for the Office of Student Equity and Success. And I've been a part of the team for about 9 months. That's about it.
Thank you, Celia. And Celia's being very humble, not 9 months, but 9 months of really keeping our entire team together in the equity office and helping so much with this entire new Employee Equity Academy. So thank you all. We're gonna go ahead and get started here again. I just wanted to share with you all that we have a small group today, and I believe 13, if I'm not mistaken, Susie, who are here today. I believe we had about 15 people register for today's kickoff event. Just so you know, you're 13 or 15 of approximately 45 new employees who have been hired at Fresno City College since last September. So that includes faculty, counselors, and administrators. So that's a beautiful thing that we have 45 new colleagues who we get to work with and engage in activities at Fresno City College. So just so you know, there'll be more participants at the upcoming events, and we'll talk more about those events here shortly. So this is just an overview of today's agenda and our time together. We're going to end at 11 o'clock. We like to start on time and we like to end on time. So we're going to make every effort to do so. We'll start with our kind of opening remarks here and then go into introductions of the new employees as well as your support team. And you're going to meet, not meet, but become familiar with some of your Senate leaders. And we'll go into a component about our students. And where we'll spend most of our time together today is on the third to last bullet item here, which is the equity conversation. That's where we want to spend a lot of time. And we're calling it a conversation because we do invite you to engage in in dialogue, questions. We don't want it to be talking to you the entire time because we know how that feels, and also just being talked to doesn't necessarily equate to learning, right, or memory retention. So we encourage you to engage in dialogue. There are multiple modes in which you can do so. You can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand, you can also engage and use the chat feature via Zoom. So those are the multiple modes in which you can engage with us today in the equity conversation. And then we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming events for the New Employee Equity Academy. We have a faculty specific event coming up here shortly. And then we have the general 3-day New Employee Equity Academy. And that'll be towards the end of this month. And of course, we'll close with some final remarks. So before we go further, what I want to start with is kind of just some background information. You might be wondering, well, what is this New Employee Equity Academy or why this New Employee Equity Academy? And just so you know, there's a good amount of institutional support and encouragement for today's event. This is our second annual New Employee Equity Academy. We did our first one virtually last year as we were learning how to virtually engage, right? It was what we consider successful, but even from there, we feel like we learned some things that we hope will improve your experience in this year's event. But really, this New Employee Equity Academy is an activity that we included in our college student equity plan. California community colleges are required to maintain a 3-year student equity plan as a condition for receiving state funds. So I say that to demonstrate just the importance of the student equity policy in California. And it's something that's important to us as a college, not just as a regulatory policy requirement, but for many of us at Fresno City College, it's our moral responsibility, and it's also our why. So that's why we have our New Employee Equity Academy, and that's what brings you here with us today. So speaking of our why, this is actually a slide that we recycled from last year because I feel like this speaks to not only our call to action as educators, and if you're a counselor, a classified professional, or an administrator, you are indeed an educator. Anyone who works in an educational institution is an educator, and it's not just in a formal context, if you will, in the classroom. The student learning experience also happens outside of the classroom. We know that through research, and we know that through our own experiences. So that is something that is very important. So our call to action as educators really, I think, is exemplified by this quote that you see at the bottom of the screen, but just a thought-provoking quote that was shared by Deputy Chancellor Dr. Daisy Gonzalez at last year's FIRST, really was the initial call to action webinar that was hosted by the California Community College Chancellor's Office. It was a phenomenal call to action webinar. And it's what I call me as an equity and racial equity scholar practitioner. I have been engaged in doing work centered in equity, anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion as well for quite some time, right? And that may not be the normal experience for many. So when I first saw this call to action video last year, and I heard and I saw what officials at the chancellor's office level, right, at the state level of the California Community College system, what they were calling on California Community College educators to do was not only a time coming, but it was very encouraging. And so to have that support at the chancellor's office for some of the work that we have been doing as a college and continue to do is very much not only appreciated, but it's a motivational factor. So just a forewarning, I'm gonna do a little reading today. I am not one to regurgitate words from PowerPoints. Those of you that know me, I hope can attest to that. However, as I was thinking about this presentation, there are some things that are just very critical that I really want you to be aware of. And so I am going to do a little bit of reading here in this slide and probably about the next 2 or 3 slides. So forgive me for that. Okay, so just bear with me. So this bottom quote here, I'll spare you on that one. I won't read it to you since I'm sure you've had some time to read it. But essentially what the chancellor's office is calling for is not only an awareness of forms of institutional racism and oppression that have manifested in various forms throughout society, but more specifically to think about how those manifestations show up in educational context, in educational settings, and then to think about our own experiences, our privileges and our positions in general. It could be a position as an employee and just your position in general as an individual, and use your own agency to really combat forms of racism and to work towards creating equitable spaces and opportunities for our students and with each other as employees. That is something that is really important. So there's a lot of support for creating a culture of equity mindedness and anti-racism at Fresno City College. And a lot of that support has not only been demonstrated through faculty, classified professionals, but it also has been demonstrated through the executive leadership level. And so that's like our vice presidents and presidents, right? And this excerpt that you see right here, this is a quote that came out of our 2021 Equity Leadership Academy. It was a 6-month intensive training slash what I call reflective learning experience for all Fresno City College administrators and leaders. And it was facilitated by a wonderful person by the name of Dr. Regina Stanback Stroud. And we created a program or a little pamphlet for that Equity Leadership Academy. So this is an excerpt that I am going to read from our college president, who's unable to join us today, but will be at the upcoming New Employee Equity Academy events. So Dr. Goldsmith goes on to say, equity-minded leadership centered on accomplishing successful student outcomes and experiences requires intentionality and focus. If we are to live up to our promise we make to our community to literally transform lives through education, which is in our vision statement, transforming lives through education, we must then be willing to take personal and institutional responsibility for the advancement of our students and critically reassess our practices. We can and must embrace a keenly developed racial and cultural literacy that equips us to transcend the social, cultural, historical, and political structures and forces that create, maintains, and perpetuates inequity. Leadership is about having the courage, compassion, and commitment to make it matter that we are in our positions and afforded the privilege and honor of serving in the capacity in the first place. Leadership matters. And so, although this was an excerpt from the Equity Leadership Academy for administrators, I think this is very much applicable and germane to all of us here. You're all leaders, regardless of title, regardless of position. We're educators and we are leaders in the eyes of our colleagues, our stakeholders, and our students, most importantly, right? So this is a very beautiful quote that I wanted to share with you. And another quote from that pamphlet, the workbook, this is something that I wrote in the pamphlet, which I'm also going to share. Access without equity is an unfulfilled promise. And until community colleges take full responsibility for dismantling colorblind, race-neutral, and race-evading policies, structures, and practices, they will continue to reproduce racial and gender outcome disparities. This is what equity-minded leadership is about. Equity-minded leadership is about being bold and courageous and willing to use our positions of influence, power, and privilege to foster an ethos of belonging, affirmation, and validation that normalizes a culture of racial equity. To truly transform lives through education, we must focus on our students and communities of color who want Fresno City College to be a catalyst to increase social mobility and a better quality of life. Equity-minded leadership is not only a mindset, but also a heart set. I know that's not a word, but it's my word. And one of these days, it might show up in a publication with my last name attached to it. So then it will officially be a word somewhere in the academic universe. So this equity-minded work that we're going to invite you to engage in, not only today, but over the next year and beyond. It's not just a mindset, but it's a heart set. And I truly believe that. And I just want to invite you to consider that. And so as I read these two quotes, you might be wondering, I thought this was a new employee like Equity Leadership Academy, like in orientation, right? Well, it is. This is exactly what it is. What we have done, and hopefully what I've demonstrated just with these two quotes, is that we're not just so much concerned about showing you where the stapler is, how to operate the printer, where your office is, and where some of the things are on campus, and items that you should be aware of as an employee that are generally included in college and employee orientations. Instead, what we're trying to do and demonstrate to you is that as we orient you to our college culture that we are trying to create, which is an equity-minded and anti-racist culture, we're hoping that we can not only orient you to that culture, but guide you and facilitate your learning experience that better allows you to contribute to that culture that we are trying to create. And so that's really what it's all about. And know that you have the support from the campus leadership, and you also have the support from our academic senate and classified senates, which you're going to learn more about later. So speaking of, our college, like many institutions of higher education, as they continue to engage in their racial reckoning and awareness of how institutions of higher education can and must do better, our college also has been reckoning with these same terms. And although our college has been engaged in equity work for quite some time, much increasingly since about 2015, the college certainly has been doing equity work far before then, but there's an equity policy and funding that also coincides with that 2015 year and timeline, which I'll share more information about later. But you know, equity work is not necessarily synonymous with anti-racism unless you're very intentional about it. And so really, when I say that our college as an institution has been reckoning with these items over the past year plus, it speaks to how much more work we have to do as an institution. And our joint academic and classified senate anti-racism resolution is a testament of that acknowledgement. And more importantly, it's a testament of the action-oriented work that our academic senate and classified senates are willing to promote and engage in as it relates to anti-racism and racial equity. And so our college took a long time to create this statement, this anti-racism resolution, a very long time. In fact, I think most of our colleges in the district created their anti-racism resolutions last year within a matter of weeks, if not a month or so, approximately. I could be wrong. It took our college almost a year. Our academic senate joined together with classified senate. I was invited to participate. I was very grateful. Not me as an academic administrator, not being associated with academic senate and classified senate, right? As a direct constituent, I was very honored and privileged to participate in that process. And I learned so much from my colleagues who engaged in that process. But the reason why it took us so long, and I'll turn it over to Michael after this, our academic senate president, if he wants to share anything. But the reason why it took us so long to create this anti-racism resolution is because our colleagues on the task force who wrote this didn't want it to be a statement without action and didn't want it to be a statement that wouldn't bear observable and perceivable results. And so that was something that was very important to the task force that worked on the anti-racism resolution. And so what I'll do is I'll give you just a little vignette. And please let me know if you can see this. If I put it on my second screen, can you see this? Perfect, awesome. Thank you, James, I saw a nod. I was looking at James, appreciate that. So just so you know, this was developed almost over the course of a year, of an academic year. And what you can see here, if you're familiar with higher education resolutions or resolutions in general, this is not your typical resolution. We have our preamble, which essentially is a preface to the more typical items in a resolution. And we're going to share this with you after today, as long as I get permission. I believe we can share it, Michael. It's been, Michael and Susie, this has been approved by both Academic Senate and Classified Senate now, right? Awesome, yes. So we can definitely share it. This preamble is thought-provoking. It is extremely thought-provoking. And the energy, power, the heart and drive that went into this is just absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. And this is something that really belongs to our college and that you can be proud of. But I encourage you to read this in your own time. You can see the preamble here, and we have our whereas statements and our therefore be it. These are, again, typical, the whereas statements and the therefore be it. I wanted to show these to you because this is something that both of our senates are saying is important to them and important to us as a college. And so, again, I'm not going to read this, but I really want to encourage you to just preview that once we share it with you after today. But Michael, did you want to share anything or say anything about our joint Academic Senate and Classified Senate anti-racism resolution?
Ray, I think you said you said it very well, but I do want to highlight something that I touched on a little bit earlier when I introduced myself, and that is that you know, Academic Senate, Classified Senate, and then Ray's office in equity haven't necessarily historically always worked together closely. This is a testament to the power that I spoke of earlier, to the work that we can accomplish when we all work together. And so I really want to make it a focus of my upcoming 2 years as the Academic Senate president to make sure that the Academic Senate, the Classified Senates, and the Equity Office work very closely together to make sure that that again, to Ray's point, that the actions that are listed on this, that were so important, right? Because all these statements without actions are essentially meaningless. And so I really look forward to, again, that working closely together in the future to make sure that those actions aren't just statements that that a group of people put together on a piece of paper, but rather that we hold true to all the work that was put behind this resolution, and to the thought, and then and also to the drive and the purpose. So that I just wanted to add that little bit.
Thank you, Michael. And we're very much looking forward to your leadership as the Academic Senate president. It's going to be a wonderful 2 years, which is good timing because our college will be rewriting, well, not rewriting, but writing a new student equity plan. I mentioned the 3-year equity plan that we have. It's going to time out here pretty soon. So beginning next fall, we'll have to start working on a new equity plan. So it's just, it's very reassuring and encouraging as a college to have so much support from Academic Senate and Classified Senate. Susie, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything else on behalf of Classified Senate.
No, I think both of you covered it admirably, but I did put the joint resolution in the chat so
Awesome.
that everybody here can download it and read it at your leisure after we're finished.
Of course you did. Thank you, Susie. Perfect. The last thing I want to add with regard to this this section here is you heard me talk about the culture that we are trying to create, and that institutional culture that we're really trying to cultivate is one that is anti-racist and one that is equity-minded. We'll talk more about equity-mindedness later on today, but for now, just know that that's something we're really trying to trying to bake into the cultural fabric of the college. And one of the best ways to bake anything or embed anything into the college is to center whatever those values are in the college mission, vision, core values, and our strategic plan. And we are doing just that. There is a task force, a small group of colleagues from different constituency groups who was charged by the college president at our college council, which is our main college governance group. It's called College Council. Was really charged with coming up with draft statements for the mission, vision, and core values, because our current mission and core values they're going to time out pretty soon. And so our college has to go through the whole process of creating new mission, vision, core values, and even updating the strategic plan here shortly in the future. So the task force has been doing just that. They did that. And so the task force centered equity-mindedness and principles of anti-racism into the mission, vision, and core values. And so I hope what you can kind of see is that what we're sharing with you today on behalf of the Joint Academic and Classified Senate Anti-Racism Resolution is not only something that is important and valuable to those two constituency groups, but as an institution as a whole, if these equity-minded principles and anti-racism principles show up in our final mission, vision, core values, and strategic plan, then that means as an institution, we are saying this is important to us, right? And because it's important to us, we are inviting everyone on the campus to engage in meeting the intent of our college mission. And so that's something that is really phenomenal. And that is something that I wouldn't say it's common. It's not common at all. And I only know because our task force did just a quick little review of 116 California Community College mission statements, vision statements, and core values. And we basically did kind of like a little document analysis to see how many of those statements actually have equity, diversity, inclusion words in their mission and anti-racism, right? You know, because if those words are centered, then, you know, we can say arguably to some degree they're trying to embed those principles in their strategic plan. And the majority of the colleges have diversity in their mission, vision, core values somewhere. The majority of colleges have inclusion in their mission, vision, core values, right? Fewer, like a lot fewer, far fewer, had equity in their mission, vision, and core values. And only one college had anti-racism in their mission. In their mission statement, only one out of 116 community colleges in the state. And why might that be important? Just like Fresno City College and how the overwhelming majority of our students identify as students of color, of which the majority are first generation college students, low income, among other intersecting identities, right? But the entire state, the California community college system, is the primary pathway to higher education for those same students, right? And so that's something that educators have to think about and interrogate. And fortunately here at Fresno City College, we are heading in a direction that is really consistent with our values as a college, but also we're meeting the call to action that the chancellor's office set for us. So that's something that is really exciting and something that you all get to be a part of. And I hope that makes you as happy as it makes me. So there's only 4 of us here today, part of the planning team for the New Employee Equity Academy. But as you can see by this list here, there's a number of people who have put a lot of time and effort into making this possible for all of you, your learning experience, and just trying to orient you to our culture that we're trying to create as an institution. So you see the entire support team here. Most of the people here, actually all of these people, you'll get to see and or meet coming up here at the next New Employee Equity Academy events. A couple things I did want to point out that are specific to faculty. You can see Jackie Williams typo on the last name there, and somehow it still stayed there, Susie. So my apologies to everyone and Jackie there. And Julio Trevino, you can see that they have an extra title here. It says Faculty Support Guide. Those two colleagues are going to pair up with some of our new faculty who have a kind of a different pathway than the other participants for the New Employee Equity Academy, which we'll talk more about later. So as you can see here, it's a rather good sized group of colleagues from different functional areas and positions on campus who have been participating and helping with the coordination of this event. And just some introductions here. We're not going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in the spirit of time, but we wanted to just at least display the names and the title of the positions of your colleagues who have been hired since last September. You can see there's quite a few in various functional areas and units of the college, from our very own Senior Director of Institutional Research and Planning and Effectiveness, down to our librarian, Siobhan Hess, and Alex Adams. I forgot to give a shout out to Alex Adams. We have hired quite a few people actually since last September. So you can see that there's a diverse group of position types and functional areas, which is a beautiful thing, especially when you think about the just the financial downfall and fallout over the past year. We have been able to maintain some level of hiring new positions at the college in our district, and it doesn't stop. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there's approximately 40 to 45 new hires since last September, since the last Employee Equity Academy. So you can
Ray, actually it's 64. I just counted.
64. Get out of here!
64.
Wow, goodness. Wow, that's fantastic. That's great. So these are your new hired colleagues since last September. Really a beautiful thing to see so many new colleagues in the college. We even have Celia up there who's with us today. She definitely was brought on since last September. Some more colleagues, as you can see. You're going to get to meet everyone over the course of the entire New Employee Equity Academy. But just for the kickoff today, you'll have access to this presentation and you can become familiar with your colleagues' names and position titles. Good. We're not in the equity piece yet. So your Senate leaders, you already got to meet Michael, Academic Senate President, and Susie, who is our Classified Senate President. Who is not here today is our Associated Student Government President. That's our Student Senate. That's the name here at Fresno City College. Yatsari Victoria can't join us today, but you'll get to meet Yatsari at the upcoming New Employee Equity Academy events. Marianne Valentino is psychology, I almost said philosophy, psychology faculty member here at the college, and she is the past Academic Senate President. Marianne Valentino also is the lead facilitator for our RAM Racial Equity Lab, also known as RAM-RAL. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. And then Carla Kirk, who is also not here today, is African American Studies faculty member at the college and the recent past Academic Senate President. So this is your Senate leaders. These are your Senate leaders on campus, and you'll get to meet the others who are not here today at the upcoming events. Of course, we can't introduce you to all of our students, but we thought it would be helpful and meaningful to share a brief little video about our students, so you can get to know a little bit about them and who they are, at least some of them.
Welcome to Fresno City College. As a student, there are resources here to help you succeed and focus on your educational goals. This includes how to get started and programs to support you and your needs in and out of class. Get help with registering for classes, ordering transcripts, or applying for graduation here at the Admissions and Records. Need money to pay for classes? Get help with some or all of your school expenses by visiting the Financial Aid Office. There you can apply for various types of aid, such as grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. Meet with the counselor to develop a student educational plan here in the Counseling Center. You'll get help with choosing a major and planning what classes you'll need to graduate on time. Outside of class, there are many ways for you to excel in your studies through peer tutoring in the Tutorial Center, PASS Center for English support, and the Writing Center. Don't have a computer? Not a problem. Use the computers here in our computer lab to complete your assignments and print with a pre-purchased copy card. No matter what your circumstances are, FCC has programs and services designed to provide the additional support that you'll need to succeed in all your classes. Make college the best experience for you through the special accommodations provided by disabled students and program services. These include adaptive services, ASL interpreting, on-campus mobility assistance, note-taking, and test-taking. If you served our country, let FCC serve you by supporting your educational needs with staff trained to guide you here in our Veterans Resource Center. We also provide services for our international students. EOPS opens the door for students who have financial, educational, or language barriers. They offer academic counseling, advising, financial assistance to all students who qualify. CalWorks is another program to help students who have children. They are dedicated to providing services to low-income parents who are currently receiving cash aid and seeking to become self-sufficient through education. Let's break the barriers for undocumented students here at the Dream Center. Here they provide academic support and admissions, financial aid, and counseling for new and continuing Dreamer students. Not only is FCC here to assist you with classes, there are many services to address your personal needs to make sure you cross that finish line and graduate. We know it's hard to learn when you're hungry. Ram Pantry is a free food store for currently enrolled students. Open every day, Monday through Friday. You can come grab a bite to eat or take some home so you can keep on studying. If you're feeling under the weather, FCC's nurses can help you feel better. The Health Services Office provides a clinic, over-the-counter meds, health assessments, and referrals. Life can be stressful, whether you're suffering from anxiety or adjusting to college or simply just need a safe place. FCC Psychological Services provides trained staff who are ready to listen and help. Ready to get involved in college life? Get your student ID card here at the Student Activities Office. And while you're here, check out the different athletic events, clubs, and other college activities you can enjoy here at Fresno City. Go Rams! Looking for a job? You can search for jobs here at the Career and Employment Center or on their website. They'll even help you develop a resume and practice interviews. So as you have seen, FCC caters to all your needs. All of these resources are at your fingertips. Just ask. You're not alone because FCC is your home away from home.
Just an example of the resources that we have for students, but also equally important, hopefully that helps demonstrate some of the various needs that our students require and some of the help that we provide. So let's go ahead and continue here. Alrighty, so this is where we want to spend the rest of our time together. Basically, this is really about context setting. This hopefully will enhance your experience and interactions with others over the course of the rest of the New Employee Equity Academy. We have an equity-minded syllabi review event and then the 3-day New Employee Equity Academy coming up. So I'm going to be talking a lot about equity. And so we don't want to spend a lot of time in those events defining too much and talking about what student equity is, what it's not. So again, a lot of context setting right now. And I understand you all have varying levels of understanding about what equity is. And so at any point you want to say something or speak up and join in the conversation with me, just feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself or use the chat. And just in case there's anything in the chat that I don't see, maybe Michael, Susie, and Celia, you can help with the chat there if we get anything. So for the equity conversation piece, and when I'm giving presentations about equity, just in general, I always like to start with this quote from Dr. Stella Ben-Simone, who is one of the nation's foremost experts on equity and equity mindedness in the context of higher education. And she often says that equity is a journey and not necessarily a destination. And it's a beautiful quote because what it implies is that equity, student equity or equity in experiences and outcomes, it's not simply a matter of, figuring out what you need to do to increase an outcome, right? It's not about, okay, I can do this treatment or I can use this product to address an equity gap, and that's going to address the issue. What she means more importantly about equity being a journey and not necessarily a destination is that it's the equity journey requires introspection, like, looking within. And second, that the equity journey, it doesn't stop. It's continuous and it's an ongoing reflective learning experience. And so that's what Dr. Ben-Simone basically means when she says equity is a journey and not necessarily a destination. And another reason, just for context, why I think this is a very salient point is because when I first started in my position as an equity coordinator in 2015, before I was a director, probably the most common question that I received, and I still receive from some colleagues, not as many, is how do you fix equity? Like, how do I address the issue? Like, tell me what to do. Like, how, basically, like, quote, how do you equity, end quote, right? And it's not as simple as, oh, you just do this one thing and you redress outcome disparities or close those equity gaps, right? And so, I hope that what I'm saying starts to resonate and make a little more sense as I progress through the next slides. But before we do that, I want to kind of just take a pulse for where everyone's kind of, understanding of what equity is and equity mindedness. So we're going to ask you to engage in these polls and take a few seconds to do so. Susie, did I accidentally end the poll?
Yes, you did.
So that was a test run. Thank you, everyone. You all passed.
Stay away from the poll, Ray.
I will not touch it. Give it a couple more seconds. Looks like most everyone completed. Okay, that should be good. Thank you all for completing the brief poll. So with the first one, it looks like the majority are moderately familiar or somewhat familiar, right? Or even actually the majority are extremely familiar and moderately familiar, which is a good thing of what student equity is. And in terms of how familiar you are with equity mindedness, in a similar way, the majority are extremely familiar or moderately familiar. So I think that's wonderful. It's truly wonderful. And as I'm also reminded that as you're kind of part of this group that we classify as new employees. So that means you either were hired sometime between last September and today, right? And if you were hired, the further back you were hired, the more likely you have probably been exposed to some of the webinars at the chancellor's office level, and perhaps you're at the college, which might explain some of those responses, which I think is absolutely wonderful. Even so, when it comes to terms which really are principles like equity mindedness and student equity, in an institutional context, it's important to try to facilitate experiences that allow people to operate from the same place of understanding, right? So like if I were to ask you all to define equity, there might be 13 different definitions of what equity is based on each person's, experience and the way they view the world around them. So, even so, we're going to go through these a little bit in terms of some of the terms and principles that guide our work at the college. And in the spirit of equity being a journey, we acknowledge that every person is at a different point in their equity journey. You can just be starting your equity journey, learning about it, right? You can be a little further where you're at the learning stage and now attempting to learn how to practice equity, right? And equity mindedness. And you may be on the farther end of the spectrum where you have a lived experience that has allowed you to view forms of oppression and inequities, and you're also practicing it, right? We recognize that there's a spectrum, right? And there's not one point where everyone is at this equity journey. I was hoping it was going to be that way in 2015 when I first started. I wish I would have learned what I know now then about equity being a journey, and people are at different points in that journey. So we acknowledge that and we recognize that. Our goal, the colleagues here in the planning team and as a college, our goal is to assist and help you wherever you are at in your equity journey, to provide you with the tools and resources to enable you to do more than what you're already doing at the college. So eventually though, we hope that part of your equity journey is to be authentically and consistently equity minded, and not just with students, but with each other, with students and with each other, right? A lot of the focus on at the chancellor's office level over the past year on anti-racism and the call to action has primarily been for students, but we also have to practice and be aware of those implications with each other, right? And so with students and with each other, critical reflection and consciousness, right? It's also part of the equity journey. And so we have an official definition of student equity, which is a really good thing because very few colleges in the state have official definitions of equity. And believe it or not, I laugh about this because our colleague on the call, Alex Adams, came to us from Clovis, but was at Fresno before we went to Clovis. And so Alex and I would just talk about the student equity policy and how funny it is because we have a state legislation about equity plans, but we don't have an official definition at the chancellor's office or state level about what equity is, right? That might lead to confusion across the state, right? Which we have seen it has. So we're sharing this, right, with you, our official definition of student equity. It was a wonderful undertaking by the, at that time, academic senate president, and we had constituents from various groups on campus that participated in a task force to actually create definitions for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Because again, right, we have a ton of employees on campus, and if you were to ask each of those, each person, each colleague, hey, how do you define diversity, right? You're gonna have varying responses, right, and definitions of those terms. So it's important to have identifiable and official terms to guide our work and ground us from the same place of operation and assumption, right? So this is our current equity definition. Our past academic senate president, Professor Carla Kirk, would tell you it's not good enough and we need more. That's to paraphrase what she has said. She probably will rekindle this conversation and we might have an updated definition, but nonetheless, this is our definition of student equity. Dr. Ben-Simon, Estela Ben-Simon, has one of the most simple definitions of equity, and she refers to equity specifically as parity in racial outcomes, right? So racial equity being that there are equal outcomes, right? Not to be confused or conflated with equality, right? A little different there. Equity-mindedness. So the majority of you are familiar with this phrase or concept of equity-mindedness. It is not a theory. It is a conceptual way of knowing and doing, as Ben-Simon and other colleagues describe. But in a nutshell, according to Ben-Simon and other colleagues, equity-minded principles require educators to be race conscious in a positive and affirming manner, right? As opposed to being colorblind. Institutionally focused, meaning that educators are focused on what we as individuals and as an institution can do to facilitate equity in experiences and outcomes. And educators are systemically aware in that inequities are not the result of one person's doing, one department's doing, one college is doing, but really that one college is in a larger web of systems, right? In educational contexts and societal contexts, among others. And so that's the systemically aware piece. And lastly, perhaps the most important piece, equity advancing. And the reason why this is so important is because as educators and as an institution, we can be race conscious, we can be institutionally focused, and we can be systemically aware. However, if individuals and the college as a whole are not equity advancing, then you're not practicing those principles of equity mindedness, right? They're not showing up in the classroom, they're not showing up in counseling sessions, they're not showing up in the library and across the campus and other functional areas and units. And so this is something that certainly is a guiding principle in our current work. And evidence of that is our draft mission, vision, and core value statements, which will eventually be approved one form or another. They might look different than the current draft, which we can share with you all later on. But when they do get approved, that will be institutionalized, and it will also be part of our strategic plan, which means when our college, like every university and college that is public, when we go through our accreditation process, we will be evaluated and judged upon our strategic plan and where we say our principles and values are, which are demonstrated in the mission, vision, and core values, and of course the overall strategic plan. So I'm using these slides with permission from the Center for Urban Education at the University of Southern California, which is now actually merged with the USC Race and Equity Center, led by Dr. Sean Harper. So anyhow, equality, not to be conflated with equity. This is just a refresher for all of you based on the responses to the polls. You're probably all familiar with these concepts, but we still want to just make sure we're all grounded in the same place, just to guide our conversations in the upcoming New Employee Equity Academy events. So of course, equality, right? Not to be conflated with equity. But this notion of equality in educational context can be compared to individuals who say, I care about all students, I treat all students the same. While good intentions, right, those good intentions which manifest themselves into practices eventually don't always equate to good outcomes or equitable outcomes, right? And so equity requires us to treat students individually based on their unique needs, based on their lived experiences, right? Many of which are racialized experiences, and also based on their intersecting identity. We know this world is not equal, right? And so that's where we come in as educators, and we have such a beautiful opportunity just to transform and make this world a better place for our students who come from not only Fresno, proper Fresno County, but from really all over the Central Valley. We share students, what we call, meaning we have students who are enrolled in various colleges in the district, right? We might be the flagship institution, but we really enroll students and serve students from all over the Central San Joaquin Valley. And as an open access institution, everyone has an equal chance to start at Fresno City College. And it's up to us as educators to make sure that those students also reach their educational goal. And so that's where the equity-minded principles and practices come into play. And of course, we'll be learning a lot more about that throughout the New Employee Equity Academy events. And so in this world of not being equal, and from a systemic perspective, and thinking about those forms of the principles of equity and mindedness, one of them being systemically aware, right? You know, nestled or embedded within those systems are forms of bias and racism, right? And so need I not remind us of the disproportionate impact that the worldwide health pandemic has had on not only people of color in the United States, but people of color across the world, right? And so even here in our own service area in Fresno County and beyond, we have, we know through data, local data, right, and evidence that there has been a disproportionate effect of the COVID-19 virus on those communities compared to their peer counterparts. In similar ways, we see some outcomes, student success outcomes at Fresno City College. We have seen a decrease in gaps, racial outcome disparity gaps, but not at the rate where we want them to be. And so that's what this slide essentially is demonstrating, that this world is not equal, and there are forms of bias and systemic racism that continue to perplex these very communities. And in a similar vein, within the diversity conversation, it focuses primarily on diversifying not students for us as a community college, because by nature of our institution type, we have a very racially, ethnically, and other forms of identity, diverse population. But the diversity argument or framework, if not intentionally combined with equity, racial equity, and equity mindedness, the diversity framework can overshadow equity. And this is something that I am currently witnessing across our state when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. There's a big push for diversity, equity, inclusion efforts across the state, which is wonderful. And at the same time, it is kind of overshadowing some of the equity progress that the state has made. So with that, this is where we come into play. And so in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see this is where I'm saying that this is a visual representation of where Fresno City College is at right now. So the latter essentially being public higher education and community colleges, and within that umbrella, and Fresno City College right underneath that, right? And the little, what is that? The truck with the ladder and the font there you see there, that's us. This is what we are trying to figure out. This is what we are doing, right? And so individually, colleagues in the college and as an institution in our individual and collective equity journey, this is what we are trying to do. This is what we're trying to address. And so in the spirit of the equity journey, this isn't like an exhaustive overview. So one thing I thought about this is like, I don't want anyone to walk away today like, oh, this is where we're at. Like, this is exactly where we've been and this is where we're going as a college. This is just like a vignette of Fresno City College's equity journey since 2015. And so in 2015 and 16, the college's approach to student equity was by and large programmatic and departmental. And what I mean by that is there were few programs and departments that were deemed primarily responsible for facilitating the equitable experiences and outcomes for racially minoritized students, right? And if it weren't for those, if it wasn't the programmatic and departmental approaches, there were other forms of remediation, right? So the inequities were deemed fixable by remediating students, right? In other words, fixing the students, and that'll address the equity gaps, right? 2016-17, the focus started to change a little bit for many reasons, which we can talk about over a cup of coffee, tea, or water or something. I love to do that. But the culture shift started to change to look at remediating the college. And instead of saying, hey, the students aren't ready, they're underprepared, shifting the conversation to critically think about maybe it's us as an individual, as an institution who needs to be remediated. Maybe we are not prepared to meet the students where they are at and facilitate their needs and success. After all, we are an open access institution. We're not a Research One private university. It is our responsibility to facilitate their success as an open access institution. And then in 2018, 19 kind of academic years there, we focus more on a campus culture and climate of equity mindedness. And so with the principles of equity mindedness in the backdrop that we just covered, that's where we started to shift our focus. Like, okay, this is what we need to do in practice, and this needs to be the culture of the college, right? And so where we're at currently, which brings everyone here today, right, is now we're focused on that culture, and now we're focused on actualizing those principles of equity mindedness, actualizing principles of social justice, and now anti-racism. And so this is exciting because this is the point in the college journey where you're coming in and you all get to play an equally significant role in cultivating that culture of equity mindedness and anti-racism. And as we do that, that's going to lead to more equitable experiences and outcomes for our students, which is not only amazing and wonderful for them and their families and their communities, it's the morally and ethically right thing to do for our community and for our state, right? And really our nation, right? So I'm not going to bore you to death about the student equity policy. More than anything, I just wanted you all to know that California has legislation for student equity plans. The policy is referred to as Student Equity and Achievement Program, or SEAP program, not SEAP for some reason. The Chancellor's Office doesn't like the SEAP phrase, but it's the Student Equity and Achievement Program. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's actually stipulated that in order for colleges to be considered for state funding as a minimum requirement, colleges have to maintain 3-year equity plans. So it could be a check in the box, right? You write your plan, you submit it to the state and the chancellor's office, boom, you did that, and you can get your check from the state, right? Not at Fresno City College. We really view the student equity policy in the plan not just as that regulatory requirement, but as an opportunity to really facilitate equitable experiences and outcomes. And I'll drop a link to our current equity plan in the chat if you'd like to look at it and learn more about it. But we will be writing a new student equity plan for 2022, 2026 over the next year. And so you'll be learning and hearing more about that at one point or another, I'm sure, throughout the next academic year. Another critical point that I wanted to highlight is within the same equity policy, it's kind of like a joint policy, if you will. The Guided Pathways framework, I'm certain you all have heard of, at least. You've heard of the phrase Guided Pathways. We have been engaged in Guided Pathways at Fresno State College for coming up on 5 years now. And we have what are called RAM pathways. But essentially, the equity policy is linked to the Guided Pathways program. So that's something very important you're going to be learning more about at the subsequent New Employee Equity Academy events. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Guided Pathways, but just know that we do have legislation on equity plans that have to be used pursuant to the Guided Pathways program, or the Guided Pathways plans, essentially, is what the colleges have as well. So now, these are just a few select equity plan activities, like current equity plan activities that I wanted to highlight for you all. Those slides are backwards, oops. Not sure how that happened, that's okay, we roll with it. So RAM Racial Equity Lab, RAMRAL. Formerly, this was referred to as the Interdisciplinary Faculty Equity Lab, which was a semester-long intensive reflective learning experiences for faculty to learn how to use equity-minded principles and teaching practices so they can be reflective in what they do when they facilitate learning in and out of the classroom. And so what we did between a few colleagues, primarily Carrie Ibarra, who can't join us today, and Marianne Valentino, who's not with us today, we put our thinking caps together, if you will, and we conceptualized something that would be more inclusive. After all, if we truly want to lead by example and be equitable, we would also be inclusive of what we're doing. And so instead of limiting the previous Interdisciplinary Faculty Equity Lab to faculty, we thought, hey, let's create a proposal. Let's draft something up that would also include our classified professionals and our administrators. So we have academic administrators and classified administrators. And that led to the nomenclature, if you will, of the RAM Racial Equity Lab, RAMRAL. And it's similar to the Interdisciplinary Faculty Equity Lab in that it's going to be a semester-long intensive learning experience. It will be facilitated by Marianne Valentino, and each cohort of faculty, we have a counselor cohort, we're going to have an administrative cohort, and a classified professional cohort. Each cohort is specifically tailored and customized based on those participants. And so this is something that is really phenomenal. And I forget the number, Celia or Susie, somebody remind me, but over the course of the fall and spring semesters, we anticipate that 245 participants will go through one of the cohorts in the RAM Racial Equity Lab. That's phenomenal. And so if you briefly think about this New Employee Equity Academy, it's just a kickoff, I know we're just getting started, and think about the 6-month intensive Equity Leadership Academy that I referenced earlier, along with the RAM Racial Equity Lab, you can start to see that what we're focusing on in terms of our equity efforts is not just services to students and trying to help them. We want to make sure that us as colleagues, right, faculty, classified professionals, and administrators, that we have the opportunities to learn how to practice equity, right, with ourselves, with each other, and with our students. And so that's kind of the common theme that I hope you're starting to see here. Of course, we're here at the New Employee Equity Academy. We don't need to belabor that point. And these are a few other examples of some equity activities. We have Cora, which I'm gonna touch on right now. And we have our Institutional Development for Equity, Access, and Success Idea Summit. You'll learn more about that throughout the rest of the New Employee Equity Leadership Academy events. What I do want to highlight more specifically is Cora. We have a 3-year partnership for our student equity plan with the Center for Organizational Responsibility and Advancement. This organization is co-directed by Dr. J. Luke Wood and Dr. Frank Harris III, a couple scholars who are nationally known for doing a lot of work and scholarly work and practical work, specifically on racial equity and for men of color in community colleges. So they have developed these trainings, these 15-hour online training certificate programs with other colleagues. And you as a Fresno City College employee have access at no charge to all of these online trainings. Racial microaggressions is for anyone. Teaching Men of Color is primarily for faculty. Supporting Men of Color is primarily for student services and student support services professionals. Unconscious bias is for anyone. I would recommend, if you haven't done any of these trainings, start with unconscious bias. It's just a nice, it sets a lot of context for the racial microaggressions trainings and really the rest of them. And the last 2 trainings we don't have yet. I'm working on a contract with Cora to include Black Ally Program, Dismantling Anti-Blackness on Your Campus, core competencies for allies. This training is phenomenal. I was able to participate in the pilot development of this training. My colleague and friend, Lasana Hotep, who now is the, I'm going to butcher his title, but essentially he's like the Akin of a Chief Diversity and Equity Officer at Cal, at UC Berkeley, formerly was at Skyline College. So Lasana Hotep developed this training, phenomenal training. This is primarily for our non-Black and African-American colleagues. However, it's open to anyone, as I've been informed. We'll have this, I anticipate, probably by the end of this month, we should have access to this training. And the last one is primarily for faculty, individuals who teach, counseling or instructional. Course Design for Racial Equity. These are 2 editions that you'll have access to at no charge, probably by the end of this month. And we also have what's called a Compendium of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Efforts. I'll open this link briefly. I'm not going to read everything. This is on our equity website, on the college website, and you can see essentially a list of activities that we have done to focus and actualize equity and principles of equity mindedness at the college. We've done quite a bit. You'll see it's impressive. Yet we have much more to do. So this is an overview of the New Employee Equity Academy events that are coming up. First, the next one, it's primarily, or not primarily, it's only for faculty. I believe we have 15 new faculty hires. So on July 12th, which is next week, we're inviting you to participate in an equity-minded syllabi intro. This is a phenomenal workshop for you. It's just the intro. You'll be able to engage in more learning about your equity, about your syllabi, and trying to create an equity-minded syllabi with your faculty guides later on throughout the semester and even over the course of the next academic year. And then we also have the follow-up workshop, which will give you more time to develop your syllabi. By that time, you'll have to already have one that's like in the works, ready for your dean. But at least you're going to learn, like you're starting to learn about the principles and then put it to practice. So the next time you're developing your syllabi or syllabus, you can consider those equity-minded components, as they're called. And then, of course, we have the 3-day, this is the General New Employee Equity Academy. So that's going to be August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And of course, that's for all new hires since last September, faculty, classified professionals, and administrators. And that's when you'll have the larger team at those events, and we'll have breakout sessions. And I'm really excited. We have a wonderful agenda and program lined up for all of you, and I'm excited about that. Susie, Michael, anyone, Celia, do you want to add anything to the program at a glance for me, Nia? Just want to make sure I covered everything for the upcoming events.
You got it all.
I don't think so, Ray. I think you covered it. Each day, the day 1, 2, and 3 will be, we've broken it down into, hold on, let me get to it. So day 1, we're kind of calling that get to know our FCC community. We kind of got to know each other today through the kickoff, but get to know us, get to know the president will be there, get to know who our students are. Day 2, we'll be talking about supports for success, not just for our students, but for you also, especially, as Ray said, a lot of you have been hired since September, last September, especially a lot of the classified professionals in the room. So you guys have already started on this journey, but coming in for new faculty, you know, success supports that you could present to your students, success supports that for you to become the best Fresno City College employee you could be. And then day 3 is kind of our student-centered approach to community college, kind of an extension of what we've done here, but taking you through how at Fresno City College, it's not about us, it's about our students. And so we want to focus you on that before we start the fall semester. Ray, did we lose you? We did lose Ray, didn't we?
It's at City College, the router went out for a little bit, so 2 of us lost connection, I know.
Okay. That's why we have backup. So Michael, do you want to talk about the faculty portion of the Equity Academy at a glance?
Sure. So Marianne Valentino, who is really our one of our faculty equity coordinators. She's one of the ones who's most involved with, as Ray mentioned, the racial equity labs, and she has been working on this equity-minded syllabus design for a few years now. So she's worked with many of your colleagues and future colleagues on this work. And so that'll be a really important process to go through. I know for me, when I went through that process of redesigning my syllabus with, an equity focus and an equity mind, it really changed both the way that I think about my class, but also the way that I think about my relationship with the students. So that'll be a really important process for you all to go through. And even if you've gone through a process similar to this before, there's definitely always something new to learn, especially as you work with some new colleagues. And you really get a chance to work with them and see some of the amazing things that our faculty at Fresno City College have done and will be doing. Yep. And then, as Susie mentioned, that 3-day orientation will be an important chance for you to be able to orient yourself to the college and to what we're doing, which is, again, going to be an extension of what Ray has done such a great job starting today, which is really to center us on equity and the focus on equity at our college, which again, I know Ray mentioned this, but for many of you who have taught at different colleges, who have experience at different colleges, who have talked to colleagues from other colleges, to have this singular focus as we move forward on equity, particularly in the actions of the college, I think is very important. And it's something that I know is not necessarily unique, but there aren't many colleges who are moving in this direction in the way that we are. So it's this process that you're going to go through is extremely important. Particularly for our students, especially for our students, right? Because at the end of the day, they're the only ones that matter. and yeah, and then, you know, in the fall and spring, you will have a chance for all the faculty here with your faculty guides to go again through that process of doing some of these equity trainings, but then also having a chance to check in with your fellow colleagues. And then, you know, one of the other things that was important for us from a faculty perspective was that you had the chance to in this first year, go through this work and have a cohort that you're working with that are outside of your immediate discipline and definitely outside of your division. Because, you know, for those of you who have taught before and who have experience, you know, oftentimes when you first start working, it's your department or division colleagues that that you get to know and you really have a chance to get to work with. But again, you know, just kind of highlighting something that many of us have talked about today. You know, to be the best that we can be for our students, it really takes all of us working together, right? Interdivisionally, you know, interdepartmentally, and then, you know, working with a lot of the different constituency groups. So that'll be the focus, and it'll be an exciting first year.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, and as Michael said, so this is not a one and done. You're not, you know, on August 4th, we're not done. This continues throughout. You go through as cohorts throughout the 2021-2022 academic year. Just provide you for the faculty first year overview with your support guides and your cohort. This is what you'll be talking about with your faculty support guides. We will assign you to your cohort with your faculty support guides. We have Jackie Williams and Julio Trevino, both absolutely stellar faculty support guides. They did it for us last year, and we had a year-end event where it was a kind of culmination of the work that we started and the feedback that we got from everybody who participated in this year-long cohort was just absolutely phenomenal. So this kind of just shows you kind of some of the things you'll be covering with your support guides as you go on. The 3-day orientation is kind of to get you started through your first couple of weeks of the semester, and then that work continues on. Any questions from anybody? And now I've lost I can't see my participants because I'm sharing the screen. So Michael, if you haven't seen anybody have any questions. No.
No, you're good.
Oh, and there's Ray. Ray, you're just in time to close this out.
Thank you, Susie. Sorry about that, everyone. Tried to switch screens and I left the call and took forever to get the link back on. So equity as a journey has been the theme kind of throughout the slide deck today. And I just love this quote from Ben Simone, McNair, Ben Simone, and Malcolm Pecue. This is out of a book titled From Equity Walk to Equity Talk. And they go on to say that this equity journey begins with you. Change must happen individually before it can happen collectively. It's such a thought-provoking quote because the collective change is what we want. The collective change is what we're trying to nurture here at Fresno City College. And that changes from an old culture, right? However you want to define that, to a culture that is equity-minded and values principles of anti-racism. And so in a similar way, if we keep doing the same old thing, yet we want different results, that means we're individually and institutionally insane, right? As the saying goes. And so with that, I want to leave this quote with you, and we want to thank you for spending time with us today, to be here and available and engage with us. And hopefully this helps you kind of think about how you can use principles of equity in your own experience at the college. And along the way, like Michael and Susie were saying, we're going to help you. We're going to support you. So with that, thank you again, everyone. And keep a lookout for a follow-up email. You'll get an email from one of our colleagues for a survey. Please complete that for a session evaluation survey. And also some more details and information about next week's Equity-Minded Syllabi review and the 3-day New Employee Equity Academy. And also for our faculty colleagues in the call, you can anticipate an email from probably my colleague, Melody Critchfield, about compensation. We certainly will pay you the I think it's $25 per hour contract negotiated agreement for these types of events. So just keep an eye out for those emails, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you guys for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
Sounds
Faculty, thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.